In Greek mythology, Selene is the goddess of the moon. She is the daughter of the Titans Hyperion and Theia, and sister of the sun god Helios, and Eos, goddess of the dawn. She drives her moon chariot across the heavens. Several lovers are attributed to her in various myths, including Zeus, Pan, and the mortal Endymion. In classical times, Selene was often identified with Artemis, much as her brother Helios was identified with Apollo. Both Selene and Artemis were also associated with Hecate, and all three were regarded as lunar goddesses, although only Selene was regarded as the personification of the moon itself. Her Roman equivalent is Luna. Names. The etymology of Selene is uncertain, but if the name is of Greek origin, it is likely connected to the word seles, meaning light, just as Helios, from his identification with Apollo, is called Phoebus. Selene, from her identification with Artemis, is also commonly referred to by the epithet Phoebe. The original Phoebe of Greek mythology is Selene's aunt, the Titaness mother of Leto and Asteria, and grandmother of Apollo, Artemis, and Hecate. Also from Artemis, Selene was sometimes called Cynthia. Selene was also called Mene. The word men meant the moon and the lunar month. It was also the name of the Phrygian moon god Men. Origin. The usual account of Selene's origin is given by Hesiod. In the Theogony, the sun god Hyperion espoused his sister Theia, who gave birth to great Helios and clear Selene, and Eos, who shines upon all that are on earth and upon the deathless gods who live in the wide heaven. The Homeric hymn to Helios follows this tradition. Hyperion wedded glorious Euryphiassa, his own sister, who bare him lovely children, rosy-armed Eos and rich-dressed Selene and tireless Helios. Quote, here Euryphiassa is probably an epithet of Theia. Other accounts make Selene the daughter of Pallas, the son of Megamedes or of Helios. Lovers and offspring. Endymion. Selene is best known for her affair with the beautiful mortal Endymion. The late 7th century, early 6th century BC poet Sappho apparently mentioned Selene and Endymion. However, the first direct account comes from the 3rd century BC Argonautica of Apollonius of Rhodes, which tells of Selene's mad passion and her visiting the fair Endymion in a cave on Mount Latmus, and the Titanian goddess, the moon, rising from a far land, beheld her as she fled distraught, and fiercely exulted over her, and thus spake to her own heart, not I alone then stray to the Latmian cave, nor do I alone burn with love for fair Endymion. Oft times with thoughts of love have I been driven away by thy crafty spells, in order that in the darkness of night thou mightest work thy sorcery at ease, even the deeds dear to thee. And now thou thyself too hast part in a like mad passion, and some god of affliction has given thee Jason to be thy grievous woe. Well, go on, and steel thy heart, wise though thou be, to take up thy burden of pain, fraught with many sighs. Quintus Smyrnius's The Fall of Troy tells that, while Endymion slept in his cave beside his cattle, Selene watched him from on high, and slid from heaven to earth, for passionate love drew down the immortal stainless queen of night. The eternally sleeping Endymion was proverbial, but exactly how this eternal sleep came about and what role, if any, Selene may have had in it is unclear. According to the catalogue of women, Endymion was the son of Aethlius, and Zeus granted him the right to choose when he would die. A scholiast on Apollonius says that, according to Epimenides, Endymion, having fallen in love with Hera, asked Zeus to grant him eternal sleep. However, Apollodorus says that because of Endymion's surpassing beauty, the moon fell in love with him, and Zeus allowed him to choose what he would, and he chose to sleep forever, remaining deathless and ageless. Cicero seems to make Selene responsible for Endymion's sleep, so that she might kiss him while sleeping. From Pausanias we hear that Selene was supposed to have had by Endymion 50 daughters, who possibly represented the 50 lunar months of the Olympiad. Non-news has Selene and Endymion as the parents of the beautiful Narcissus, but in other accounts, including Ovid's Metamorphoses, Narcissus was the son of Cephasus and Liriope. Others, according to the Homeric hymn to Selene, the goddess bore Zeus a daughter, Pandia, exceeding lovely amongst the deathless gods. Alcman makes Ursa, the daughter of Selene and Zeus. Selene and Zeus were also supposed by some to be the parents of Nemea, the eponymous nymph of Nemea, where Heracles slew the Nemean lion, and where the Nemean games were held. Some accounts also make Selene and Zeus the parents of Dionysus, but this may be the result of confusing Semele, the usual mother of Dionysus, with Selene because of the similarity of the names. Whereas for Hesiod, the Nemean lion was born to Echidna and raised by Hera, other accounts have Selene involved in some way in its birth or rearing. Aelian on Animals 12.7 states, "They say that the line of Nemea fell from the moon," and quotes Epimenides as saying, "For I am sprung from fair tress Selene the moon, who in a fearful shudder shook off the savage lion in Nemea, and brought him forth at the bidding of Queen Hera." Quintus Smyrnius makes Helios and Selene the parents of the Heraic goddesses of the seasons. Smyrnius describes them as the four handmaidens of Hera, but in most accounts the number is 3, and the parents is Zeus and Themis. According to Virgil, Selene also had a tryst with the great god Pan, who seduced her with a snowy bribe of wool. Scholia on Virgil add that the god wrapped himself in a sheepskin. Selene was also said to be the mother of the legendary Greek poet Musaeus, the moon chariot. Like her brother Helios, the sun god, who drives his chariot across the sky each day, Selene is also said to drive across the heavens. The hymn to Selene provides a description. The air, unlit before, glows with the light of her golden crown, and her rays beam clear. Whensoever bright Selene, having bathed her lovely body in the waters of ocean, and donned her far-gleaming raiment, and yoked her strong-necked, shining team, drives on her long-maned horses at full speed, at event-time in the mid-month. Then her great orbit is full, and then her beams shine brightest as she increases. So she is a sure token and a sign to mortal men. The earliest known depiction of Selene driving a chariot is inside an early 5th century BC red figure cup attributed to the Brygos painter, showing Selene plunging her chariot, drawn by 2 winged horses, into the sea. Though the moon chariot is often described as being silver, for Pindar it was golden, and while the sun chariot has 4 horses, Selene's usually has 2, described as snow white by Ovid, or was drawn by oxen or bulls. Depictions. Surviving descriptions of Selene's physical appearance and character, apart from those which would apply to the moon itself, are scant. 3 early sources mention Selene's hair. Both the hymn to Helios and the hymn to Selene use the word epsilon pi lambda omicron kappa alpha mu omicron sigma, variously translated as rich, bright, or beautiful-haired, and Epimenides uses the epithet lovely-haired. The hymn to Selene describes the goddess as very beautiful, with long wings and a golden diadem, calling her white-armed and benevolent. Aeschylus calls Selene the eye of night. The Orphic hymns give Selene horns and a torch, describing her as all-seeing, all-wise, a lover of horses and of vigilance, and a foe of strife, who gives to nature's works their destined end. In antiquity, artistic representations of Selene included sculptural reliefs, vase paintings, coins, and gems. In red figure pottery before the early 5th century BC, she is depicted only as a bust, or in profile against a lunar disk. In late art, like other celestial divinities, such as Helios, Eos, and Nyx, Selene rides across the heavens. She is usually portrayed either driving a chariot, or riding side-saddle on horseback. Paired with her brother Helios, Selene adorned the east pediment of the Parthenon, where the two framed a scene depicting the birth of Athena, with Helios driving his chariot rising from the ocean on the left, and Selene and her chariot descending into the sea on the right. From Pausanias, we learn that Selene and Helios also framed the birth of Aphrodite on the base of the statue of Zeus at Olympia. There are indications of a similar framing by Selene and Helios of the birth of Pandora on the base of the Athena Parthenos. Selene also appears on horseback as part of the gigantomachy frieze of the Pergamon altar. Selene is commonly depicted with a crescent moon, often accompanied by stars. Sometimes, instead of a crescent, a lunar disk is used. Often a crescent moon rests on her brow, or the cusps of a crescent moon protrude, horn-like, from her head, or from behind her head or shoulders. Selene's head is sometimes surrounded by a nimbus, and from the Hellenistic period onwards, she is sometimes pictured with a torch. In later 2nd and 3rd century AD Roman funerary art, the love of Selene for Endymion and his eternal sleep was a popular subject for artists, as frequently depicted on Roman sarcophagi. Selene, holding a billowing veil forming a crescent over her head, descends from her chariot to join her lover, who slumbers at her feet. In post-Renaissance art, Selene is generally depicted as a beautiful woman with a pale face and long, lustrous black hair, driving a silver chariot pulled either by a yoke of oxen or a pair of horses. Cult moon figures are found on Cretan rings and gems, but apart from the role played by the moon itself in magic, folklore, and poetry, and despite the later worship of the Phrygian moon god men, there was relatively little worship of Selene. An oracular sanctuary existed near Thalami in Laconia, described by Pausanias. It contained statues of Pasiphae and Helios. Here Pasiphae is used as an epithet of Selene, instead of referring to the daughter of Helios and wife of Minos. Pausanias also described seeing two stone images in the marketplace of Elis, one of the sun and the other of the moon, for the heads of which projected the rays of the sun and the horns of the crescent moon. Originally Pandia may have been an epithet of Selene, but by at least the time of the late Homeric hymn, Pandia had become a daughter of Zeus and Selene. Pandia may have personified the full moon, and an Athenian festival, called the Pandia, usually considered to be a festival for Zeus, was perhaps celebrated on the full moon and may have been associated with Selene.